Hi, today we're going to be talking about what you can borrow and what you can afford. Hi. Now, firstly, when you want to know the all important what can I borrow? Now, this is related to not only what your income is, but also what your credit commitments are. So what I mean, do you have a car loan? Do you have unsecured loans, sort of personal loans, not just for a car, but for any reason really? So they'd start off, for example, say you're on £25,000 and you've got £5,000 worth of debt. Now, most ratios, they'll look at probably four times or 4.5 times. So it will be 4.5 times the 20,000, not the 25,000, which would give you 90k in that example. But then on top of that, which they don't tell you in the background, they look at the size of your deposit. They'll look at the term that it's going on. So if you're doing like a 25-year term or a 30-year term, then they know you're going to be able to pay it back because you've got more time, so they might lend you a little bit more, and then other things, but if it's less, then they might lend you a little bit less. So it isn't set on, in this example, the 90,000. They will take your deposit size into account, the term of the mortgage into account, and also what they call a stress test. Now, what a stress test is, based on the interest rate. So if, for example, if the Bank of England interest rate was 2%, they would then say, okay, what's the most it's going to go up? Would it go up by another 2% or another 3%? Then they will stress test it on 5%, which will also bring down your borrowing slightly. So it's not a straight, like it used to be, 4.5 times your salary, unfortunately. So that's how you would look at what you can afford to borrow. The next thing to look at is what you can afford to Now, what I mean by that is, once you've sorted out what you can borrow, what will happen is, depending on the interest rate and the term, as I've said before, this will also be included in what the monthly payments are going to be. Now, what you need to understand is whether you can afford to make that monthly payment every single month, because I've got to say this, sorry, but your property will be at risk if you miss mortgage repayments. They are the top thing not to miss. If you're struggling financially, then pay less on your credit card, negotiate to pay less on your monthly unsecured loans, but do not miss a mortgage payment. That is something that I just had to put out there. But anyway, back to affordability. So with affordability, what you do is it starts with, if you're self-employed, it's what you pay yourself every month in the bank. If you are employed, it's what you receive from your employer. So you'd have your gross salary divided by 12, or divided by 13, depending whether you're paid every 4 weeks or every month. And then obviously tax, national insurance on the employed side gets taken out, pension, student loan, any of that stuff. So then you've got your take-home pay. And then obviously with self-employed, it's whatever you physically pay yourself in the bank. So it could be dividends, it could be director's loan, it could be director's salary. So that is the money that hits your bank account. From that, there are certain deductions that you have to take off. Now, first, I would take off the committed expenses. So when you're looking at your committed expenses, that would be all your direct debits. And once you've looked at all your direct debits, then you have to look at any other committed expenses, any standard orders, things like that. And the next thing you look at are your regular bills. So that has to come off. So that would be things like food. If you've got a car, it would be petrol, it would be car tax, it would be car insurance. So some of those are paid monthly, annually. If it's annual, I divide it by 12 and still deduct it off your monthly budget. You look at clothes and socializing. I put them last because at the end of the day, you can reduce the amount of clothes that you buy, and you can reduce your amount of socializing if you need to. So they're not committed expenses, they're more sort of luxury expenses. Then the next thing to look at are all the bills that you don't actually pay yet because you're a first time buyer. Now, those would include things like, so they're future bills, I like to call them. So they will be your council tax, they will be your gas, there will be your electricity, water, boiler cover. I would recommend that. It really does help if things go wrong in the winter and you want to call out British Gas or whatever. It can be very expensive to replace a boiler, so make sure you have boiler cover and any other big appliances that tend to go wrong. So that would be your washing machine, if you want a dishwasher, and then things like that. Then you also, and this will be mandatory for the mortgage, you'll need building insurance. Then the other thing I'd like you to consider are other insurances like life insurance. I mean, you insure your car, so you should really insure yourself. So those are all the deductions that you have to look at. So once all of that has deducted and you just work out if it's annually what the monthly amount is, then you come to what your monthly disposable income is. And once you've got that, that is the amount that has to be able to cover your mortgage. So that is what you can afford means. So when people are talking about what you can borrow and what you can afford, that is why there's such a difference, because one is a lump sum that you're going to use to buy the property, and the other one is the monthly to be in order to pay it back. If you aren't happy with what you can borrow, there are certain things to look at. You can save a little bit more deposit. You can work on reducing your credit, your credit commitments and things like that. So those are the things that you can kind of work on to increase how much you can borrow. The other thing is, when I talked about the stress test, different banks have different stress tests. So when you're looking at a calculator, so you could go online and look at your what you can borrow on on one of the affordability calculators with the bank. I use a database myself that literally gives me about 30 to 40 different lenders and what they lend, and I can tell you they are all slightly different. So it also does depend on the lender. Sometimes, when you're speaking to your mortgage advisor, you'd ask them to go with a lender that completely maxes you out for how much you want. Sometimes the interest rate may be a little bit higher, but if you can borrow more, then, you'll get the place that you want. The other thing is, speaking of getting the place that you want, you have to make a decision. When I bought my first property, I literally bought what I could afford. It wasn't my forever home. It was one that I could move into, needed a bit of lick of paint, and then it was all good. So that was my first flat by myself. When I bought my first house, it was a really good location because I was concerned about schools. So that makes a big difference in price. If you're not as bothered about location, then, you may be able to get more for your money if you move, further away from from a station, or in a different zone or something like that. But if it is about the location, when I got my house, I knew I'd be having kids, so I wanted it to be close to schools, close to my parents, that kind of thing. That was important to me. So what we did is we got what I call a fixer-upper. So we got a really decent road, but our property needed a lot of work. So you can weigh it up. So I wouldn't say for your first property to get your forever home that you just move into. Unless obviously you're looking at Help to Buy and things like that. I mean, they generally aren't fixer-uppers and that kind of thing. But that's what to look at. So if you've got any questions about what you can borrow or what you can afford, please. So if you've got any questions about what you can borrow or what you can afford, please let me know. Send me a voice note back or comment or whatever you need, and then we can go through it and I can answer your questions. Thank you.